Hi, I'm Ralph Woodward, and you're about to see the first of three short films that I made recently on a trip to Aldeburgh in Suffolk. The reason for going there is that Aldeburgh was for many years the home of the great composer Benjamin Britten, and we're going to be performing his iconic War Requiem in Ely Cathedral on March the 7th. These short films are excerpts from a longer film that we'll be releasing in a few weeks, so this first little taster sees me at his home, the Red House in Aldeburgh, in both his composing studio and the archive. The War Requiem came about as the result of a commission from Coventry Cathedral. The old Coventry Cathedral was destroyed, pretty much destroyed, by a Luftwaffe raid in 1940. And after the war, there were great plans, new plans were drawn up for a new Coventry Cathedral to be consecrated in 1962. And in 1958, Britten was approached with a fairly open brief. They certainly had in mind a fairly large-scale work, but the whole inspiration, the idea of the War Requiem was very much Britten's own. So that this collision of the Latin Mass and the Wilfred Owen poems, I think, took shape gradually in his mind, and then composition started in earnest in about April of 1961, a little burst before the festival, then a bit more in the summer and a bit more in the autumn, and he finished the composition draft, which is the main stage of composition for him, just before Christmas 1961, and then pieced together the full score, completing it in January 1962, and the premiere was May the 30th, 1962, in Coventry Cathedral, and quite an amazing occasion I think it was. So we have here the very significant correspondence between Britten and Coventry Cathedral. So this folder here, this is Britten to Coventry Cathedral, so this letter that's on the top, dated October 1958, is basically Britten saying, yes, I accept the commission, and the last line is, and shall do my best to turn out something worthy of it, in haste, yours ever. So that's Britten to Coventry, and a kind of a twin pack, if you like. Here is Coventry to Britten, another fairly lengthy, voluminous stuff here. We were talking a little bit off camera now about how email has changed the speed of correspondence. Well, in this case, the letter from Coventry was dated October the 7th, and Britten's reply was dated October the 8th. So that tells us that the post was pretty quick, and Britten didn't take very long to think about it before saying yes. So this is actually on BBC headed notepaper, because it was his friend John Lowe, who worked at the BBC, who had a connection, involvement with Coventry, who sort of brokered the deal initially. So there's all that. Someone ought to write a book with all this stuff in, because the whole correspondence, I'm sure, is fascinating. So that's that. So what we also have here is the correspondence between Britten and Dietrich Fischer-Dieskau. Dietrich Fischer-Dieskau was the most famous baritone in the world, I guess, at that point, particularly a Schubert leader specialist, but an amazing musician and a great voice and a great thinker and artist as well. And Britten was very keen to have him involved in the War Requiem, partly for his cunning scheme of having the three soloists representing three combatant countries, England, Russia, Germany. So this is the correspondence, this is part of the correspondence, two large folders over here of the whole thing, in which Britten is approaching Fischer-Dieskau and asking him to be involved with the piece. So the first approach was made by Britten here, February the 16th, 1961. So that's very early in the piece's gestation. He'd been thinking about it for a couple of years, but probably hadn't actually written down any music yet at this point, but knew how he had his plan. So that was sent on February the 16th, and then March the 1st, back from Berlin comes a letter from Dietrich Fischer-Dieskau saying, well, more or less saying yes, slightly complicated, sort of assuming dates work out, talk to my agent, etc. Written very elegant, formal English. So he finishes, thank you once again for your honourable request. With kind regards also to Mr. Perse, I am, yours truly, Dietrich Fischer-Dieskau. So the arrangements obviously did fall into place, and it was Dietrich Fischer-Dieskau on the night in 1962 and on the recording in 1963 who created that role.